So as I did last time, I wanted to do a video right after the interludes, this time before part 4, so the interludes at the beginning of it. And we had 3 interludes, each of them just as interesting as the others. So let's talk about those. First up, we have a very interesting conversation between 2 workers / bodyguards, and I believe her name was just Mistress. And she is an intriguing woman, a little bit mysterious, and appears to love destroying art. Why that might be, I have no idea. And although the characters were interesting in this interlude, what was most interesting was the dialogue they were having about something called the Nightwatcher. And I feel like the Nightwatcher has been mentioned before, but I'm not certain by who and when it was. And it's a relatively generic name, even though it is a cool name, so potentially I've got that mixed up with a different book. But what I do get from this conversation is the Nightwatcher will give you a boon, so something that you ask for, and it appears that it's not always in the way that you ask for it or in the way that you intended to receive it, but you also receive a curse as well. And one of the characters talked about, I think it was a family member who asked for a boon, and the curse he received was he saw everything upside down from there. And that sounded a lot like somebody like Szeth, who could lash themselves to the walls or to the ceiling, and then they would surely see everything upside down. However, it didn't mention him walking like that, so I suppose that doesn't make sense. But it is an interesting idea, this idea of the Nightwatcher. And I can already think of 2 characters that I believe have this kind of boon curse scenario. And the first one is the Collector. And the Collector himself said that he had a curse. So I don't think it's a huge stretch of the imagination to think, well, the Collector has some very cool skills. It's been a while since I read his interludes, but he has some very cool skills. He had some skills that I think were just native to his people, like the ability to think and rearrange some of his body around. So he got rid of a headache, and I think he cleared his nose potentially, and he would also write things on his skin. But maybe that's the boon that he asked for, potentially. Even though I'm not sold on that, I think that was just something that his race of people were able to do. But maybe there is something else that he actually asked for. But he was deadly certain that he did have a curse, and his curse appeared to be incredible bad luck. So that's one example. The other example would be Kaladin. Does Kaladin actually have a curse on him? I've started to think that. And in the last video, I expressed this concern because it does seem highly unlikely that in all these situations and scenarios, he's able to live, which isn't a curse, it's a boon, some would say. And his boon, maybe his boon is his fighting ability. That's very plausible because it does seem almost superhuman, the ability to defeat people who have shard blades and shard armor, the ability to win against all odds and read battlefields. But he also does seem to be cursed that everything he tries to do, everybody dies but him. So those are just my spitballing thoughts. Have maybe those 2 characters in some way met with the Nightwatcher previously? Potentially. Is the Nightwatcher a shard bearer? I don't know, as in a shard themselves, one of the 16. I don't think so. But it is very interesting, of course. So we get talk of the old magic. What is the old magic? Does it relate to the Spren? Possibly, and we'll talk about Spren more in a moment. But what I think old magic would potentially refer to is maybe when the power of whichever shards are on this planet was new. In the Mistborn trilogy, at least, what Preservation did was he had these, I can't remember the name of them now, but the nuggets that you would basically kind of like ingest or that would go into you. And that's how the very first Mistborn came about, the people who were able to utilize all of the metals. And then as they bred with each other, it tended to get less powerful. So maybe they're talking about the old magics in that sense, or they're potentially talking about something completely different. Maybe those who are like the Knights Radiant and wherever their power came from, which appears to kind of be the same thing as Szeth and Kaladin seems to have as well. So very, very interesting. And my first thought was the Spren. And then we get our next chapter, which basically gives us some, let's just talk about it. In the next chapter, we get Gerenid. And Gerenid has, first of all, a like fabrial hot plate, which is a really cool idea. And him and his partner in crime or in science are doing essentially experiments and investigations with the spren. These people are speaking openly of the cognitive realm, and what they figure out is that if you measure a spren and write it down, then that spren will no longer change shape for the period of time that you have it written down and identified as. What's really frustrating is somebody who's smarter than me could definitely take some pretty solid things from this, but I'm not able to. It seems like the first real strong scientific information we've gotten, and I have absolutely no ideas in how it ties into anything. The only thing we know is that there was a couple of things that they looked at, but they were trying to look at it really scientifically, and they were thinking like, well, if you measured it with something less accurate, etc., etc. But I have absolutely no ideas, and I don't know what it means for the spren. But what I do know is that the spren exist for humanity in a sense, at least, or they exist for those around them and for the world around them. So they're obviously integral to the plight of humanity and the other things on the planet as well, which we kind of already knew, but it's nice to get it confirmed that is the case. I don't even know if I'm really making sense, but it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to get such concrete evidence and have absolutely no idea what it means, but I'm sure a bunch of you felt the same way that I felt. It's exciting, but I have no idea what it means. So what we do is we then leave that tantalizing yet frustrating section of the interlude behind, where we feel like we should know a lot more from it and at least have some predictions to choose. And then we jump to Szeth. So we leave behind that fascinating yet frustrating part of the interlude where we feel like we should know more, and then we move on to something we're a little bit more familiar with, and that is Szeth being an absolute animal. And just before this, we got a scene where Kaladin, and we kind of knew this had happened, but we didn't get the scene described. So we get Kaladin defeating a shard bearer, somebody with the armor and then also with the blade. And that was the most impressive thing so far. However, we now get Szeth defeating 3 full shard bearers, one of them being the king of a nation, and also what feels like 100 different guards as well. And what this scene goes to prove is that the Stormlight is more efficient and effective and a more powerful thing than shard plate and the sword, shard blades as well. And it was an incredible scene. Like, it just shows his mastery, and it just keeps on opening up this question. The question is, who is Szeth? Why does he have this ability and this power? What is the deal with being truthless? Why, how? And I don't have any more answers, but all I do have is a huge appreciation for the ability of Szeth. But what I do think is with the right training, potentially even training by Szeth, which I don't know how that would come about. I think Kaladin would have to get his oath stone, and he would have to order Szeth to train him, which I think he will, by the way. That's my big prediction for this video. I think I have talked about it before. I think that somehow Kaladin will get the oath stone from Szeth, and he will order Szeth to train him, and then we will get the only character that is more powerful than Szeth, and it's going to be Kaladin trained by Szeth. So that's my big prediction for this one. The interludes are always so much fun. I don't think there's been any books that I've read that have interludes like this throughout the story. The Wheel of Time did throw in like cool preludes at the start of books, and they were often not explained until several books down, or really ever at all. Again, they just added to the world. And I think Brandon Sanderson, for this particular series, basically got a lot of his ambition from his work with the Wheel of Time, but also his love for the work of the Wheel of Time as well. And I just think that this is maybe his ode, maybe his love letter to the Wheel of Time is this piece of work here. And I know I said this in my last video and the video before, but man, this is by far his best work. Like, Mistborn was good. I did enjoy Mistborn. There were some fantastic scenes and some of the twists were amazing. Characters were okay. I did really enjoy Warbreaker. Warbreaker was good. Secret History I enjoyed, but I feel like I shouldn't have read it in that order. But whatever, I enjoyed it whilst reading. But this is something where I feel like I probably don't need a break from it. I can just continue to read it, and I'm genuinely motivated to keep on reading as well. I'm trying to find time all over the place to get these read, but sometimes the weeks just go by too quickly. Unfortunately, you guys know how it is as you get older and older. There can be less time to read, especially with full-time work and kids and things like that as well. Anyway, I'm rambling. I will see you next Sunday. I promise to you that I will have read a lot more of this book so that we can talk about it. Who knows, I might have even got to the end of it by then, because this week is looking like it's going to be a bit more free time for myself. So I will see you next Sunday. Thank you for your patience. And if you've enjoyed the videos, as always, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next Sunday.